What's pond dipping?
Oh, you know what pond dipping is.
So in this part of the video log, the vlog, I'm going to talk a little bit about my backstory, who I am, where I'm from, how I came to be working for a sustainability company, and kind of what drove me to do that. I'm a child of the 70s, which means that I was taught to turn lights off in a room when I wasn't in it, to share bath water with my sister. Unfortunately, I didn't have to do that for too long. And also put an extra jumper on when I was cold. Turning the heating up or even on was not really an issue. I learnt a huge amount from my aunt, who was the least wasteful and remains the least wasteful person I've ever met. She reused or recycled or retained everything. There was actually a drawer in her kitchen full of offcuts of tinfoil, which weren't too badly used, and so that she could reuse them again. She had a fruit and veg patch that could feed an army, and often did, which she sort of rotated. To be fair, my uncle did quite a lot of the rotating as well, but I mean, it had everything in it that you could possibly want. Had loads of different types of berries. It had marrows, which I wasn't very keen on. I never knew actually until quite a late age that a marrow was just a large courgette. I don't like either of them that much. But anyway, she was a real inspiration to me, although I'm not sure I knew that at the time, because she just she managed to live her life in a way that meant that she didn't waste anything, and I just remember thinking that was really important. And so I think there's an extent to which conserving things, or not wasting things, or sustainability, I guess as it would now called, runs a little bit in the family. I guess on the flip side of that, my father spent all of his time in the motorsport industry, which is obviously not very sustainable, using an enormous amount of fossil fuels as it does. And so it's like everything. There's a balance for these things. For myself, I think the big driver for me when it came to wanting to work for a company like Terra Neutra, wanting to work in the environmental space and the sustainability space, it's probably two things that really acted as drivers for me. One was becoming a father. I've got two children, a 5-year-old and a nearly 3-year-old, who keep me young, and so wanting them to have a healthy environment, wanting them to have a healthy world to live in, and that means obviously all of the other things that live in the world being healthy as well. I've been lucky enough to see lots of different parts of the world, and the animals and different species that inhabit it, and I want them to be able to see those too. I want those things to be still around when they're grown up, and so obviously that becoming a father was a big driver of that. I think as well, on a slightly more depressing note, I spent a lot of my working career flying around the world. I worked for a couple of companies that were global companies, so they had offices all over the world, and they had clients all over the world. And so I, over the course of about 6 or 7 years, racked up a huge number of air miles, about 313,000, I think is what it was at the last count, which, when you think about my own personal carbon footprint, it's a very sobering thought. What's particularly sobering about it is I'm not sure that I would even be considered to be like a heavy flyer from a business perspective. I think I'd probably be considered to be above average for that time when I thought I was flying really intensively, but like there's a big segment of business travel that's doing it like way more than that, and so I'm sitting there thinking, well, that number of miles is huge, and it is, but like there are going to be people there whose numbers kind of dwarf me, and that really made me sort of sit up and take notice. I think air travel is one of the areas where I like to think everybody knows how bad it is for the environment. Everybody knows that there are carbon emissions that come out of airplanes, and that it is a very environmentally damaging thing to do. And so on that point of view, it's easier to get a message to people to maybe cut back on that, or to find different ways of travelling, or to offset their flights. I'm going to be, over the course of the next couple of years, trying to offset all of my residual air miles. We've got a product called our past flights calculator, where you figure out how many flights you've taken and what sort, and then you offset that. And so I'm going to try and do that for my residual air travel footprint over the next few days and few months.
Hi, I'm Charlotte. This is my contribution to the Terra Neutra video series, Meet the Team. So I grew up in Kent, mostly, and like Luke, I grew up putting an extra jumper on when it was cold, or recycling. I did live in a village called Y that was kind of prided itself on its recycling. It's ahead of the curve recycling. But as we all know, that kind of seems a long time ago now. As in, recycling is not the head of the curve. But that's kind of the limit of my sustainability awareness, really. My journey, my sustainability journey, started pretty much about 3 years ago. I'd taken redundancy even from my role at where I worked in Virgin Media, doing digital product management for TV, and so I was at home. I've got 3 teens, well, 2 teens and 1 tween, and they actually learn about the UN Sustainability Development Goals at school, so they were talking about those. And David Attenborough was on television talking about the amount of plastic everywhere, and I kind of had time to think about it and look about the volume of plastic in our household. So I did an audit and worked out where the most plastic was coming from, and started kind of slowly doing eco swaps, as we call them, to change each of the kind of elements, and starting in the kitchen, the bathroom, various areas where you swap slowly from plastic milk bottles to the milk bottle man, Milk and More. And that was 3 years ago now, and since that time those kind of habits have become more embedded, and I've kind of widened my horizons and my knowledge, and took a pledge not to buy any new clothes for a year, which I'm quite glad to say is coming up to its end. But I will have definitely fundamentally have changed my clothes buying by then, and will only be buying clothes that also do good for the planet. But since then I've definitely learned more to wear all of my clothes much more, and wash them less, interestingly. So that's it, that's me, and you'll probably see a bit of footage of me and my dog. I do a lot of dog walking, so lucky me, I get to spend huge amounts of time out in nature, down often at the River Thames, looking at the high tide and the low tide, and seeing the herons. They're my favourite. So that's it. Thank you.
Hi there, my name's John Bamford, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about why we set up Terra Neutra, and give you a little bit of a background as to who I am and where I come from. So for the past 15 years or so, I've been involved in the fight against climate change one way or another. Whether I've been an energy efficiency consultant, designing low carbon buildings, or helping organisations identify and lower their carbon emissions, and essentially get a a handle on how much they are impacting the environment. During this time, I worked with a number of organisations from large to small, big emitters to smaller emitters, but most of those were all in the what can we do phase. So they understood essentially what the impacts were of climate change and what the risks were around it, but they didn't really understand what they could do about it in terms of reducing their emissions. Now that focus was very much on the forefront of companies at the time that were in that phase. Now a lot of other companies were in the sort of the unaware is it happening phase. And I think that what we've seen over time, and this was reflected not just on organisations but people, is that people's opinion of climate change, and generally the opinion of climate change, has shifted from a it is happening kind of effect. So the realisation through all of the media, etc., that this sort of thing is happening, to the shifting to the what can we do? We understand those risks now. And I think that you can see that in the mainstream media, and the fact that the Guardian has had a clear focus on climate change, and the BBC has also implemented its own focus areas on climate change. And obviously, with the school protests and Greta and David Attenborough as well, this has come to the mainstream. During those times with working with organisations, I was having a sort of indirect impact on the environment. So I was helping them understand their carbon emissions and also helping them reduce it. But what I realised, and I've started to realise recently, is that actually we need the global population to move those organisations that are actually still in the is it happening phases, the Donald Trumps, the deniers, or potentially even those that are just becoming aware of it, along with the ride, and mobilise the global population to really take action and actually change their lifestyles, to change their consumer habits and their thought processes, to really bring the rest of the business world along for the ride. So, say for instance you have a choice over an ethical brand or a non-ethical brand. As consumers, as the world's population increases their understanding, increases their focus on ethical brands, that will essentially drive those brands that aren't currently ethical to make changes. Otherwise they won't exist in the future, and that's really key part of sort of why and how important I felt around sort of setting up and driving Terra Neutra and launching it. So that said, our climate consciousness has grown, and in doing so it's opened up the world's floodgates of available information online, and giving us information of what we can do about climate change, reducing that down. Some of these are truthful, some of them are slightly misleading, but right or wrong, this information can cause us an overload, and it can detract from some of the main points and the most impactful actions that we can take. So for instance, removing palm oil from your products could have a counter effect on the production of oils replacements. So for instance, palm oil is extremely high yielding, and therefore a smaller amount of land is required to produce the same amount of, say, a replacement oil. But that's just some of the nuances that sort of led me down this route of trying to disseminate that information into something that's a bit more simplistic and helps people make those right choices. So